we got to sit down. Don't you think? Well, it's great to be with you today. What a crowd. This is exciting. I'm delighted to be with you. It's a little gray outside. I'm a little surprised. But, you know, it's one of the great things about Iowa. And that is that the water comes from the sky. You see, I used to work on a ranch in Idaho. And in the ranch in Idaho, to get the water for the corn, we had to irrigate. All right, so there's the big irrigation ditch, and you had to open up the ditch and let the water run down between the rows between the corn. On the way home in the train, I looked out the window and I saw Iowa, where the rain came from the sky. I said, that's how God intended it. God must love Iowa. No question about that. Yeah. I was telling that story to a guy named Larry Solly, who worked at Fisher Controls in Marshalltown, Iowa. I used to work there. And one of my first jobs as a consultant was doing some work with them. And I mentioned that story to Larry, and he said, God doesn't just love the land in Iowa, he loves the people too. And I have to tell you, I'm beginning to feel the same way. I have to let you know. I've had the privilege of now visiting 57 counties in Iowa. And my son Josh has visited 99 counties. Yeah, Josh and his wife and their 3 kids got a Winnebago and went all over the state. It's fun. He's seen the world's largest catfish, the world's largest frying pan. There are all sorts of wonderful features here in Iowa that you just can't miss. But, I'll tell you, I had a big anniversary just recently, and that was I turned 60 years old. And that's a traumatic experience, as some of you may recall. And for others, that'll happen in the far distance, right? And you know, my boys, recognizing how important the decade was, got together and bought me a gift, a special gift. And I came home from church, and they handed me a key. And I said, gosh, did you guys buy me a car? And they said, go on the driveway, take a look. And I thought, maybe a new Corvette, you know, or new Mustang, or something like that. Went on the driveway. There's a 1962 Rambler American. That was not what I expected, I'll tell you. But there was significance for me, because my dad had run the company that made Ramblers until 1962, when he became governor of Michigan. And he was 3-term governor there, so this car was connecting me to my dad and our past. And of course, they expect me to pass this car on to them, and I will. And it won't have a lot more miles on it either, because it doesn't run real well. We started the thing up, you know, and drove it up and down in front of the house and pushed it home. And I said to the boys, look how much cars have changed. If you haven't driven an old car lately, you ought to try it. The steering wheel's huge. That's because there's no power steering. You need the leverage, you know, and there are no seat belts. They didn't have it in 1962. Power steering, I mentioned. The defroster, one of my favorites. You turn the defroster on, and it still works, just like it did before. You hear it working and working. Nothing changes on the windshield, but it's working. So I said, you know, guys, you see in the private sector where I spent my life, first in small business and then larger business, you either get better or your competitor gets better and puts you out of business. You're always changing, always improving. And after a lifetime in the private sector, I went off and got to be governor of Massachusetts for 4 years, and I found that in government, nothing changes. Everything is the way it's been for year after year. You look back and things are, you know, they develop a program. They don't come back and say, you know what, that program doesn't work very well. Let's get rid of it. No, they let it sit there forever. They just put another one and another one. I'm told there are 342 different economic development programs in this country. Some of them in different agencies and departments. There are 13 teenage prevention programs in the federal government. They're obviously not working, first of all, but number two, there are a lot that I'd say, look, let's combine these. Let's find the ones that are working and eliminate the excess and the duplication. We've got to become more effective and more efficient. I want to see change in Washington. If there's ever been a time that change was needed in Washington, I think it's now. And let me just note in that regard that I think a lot of us hope to see a lot of change when we took over the House and the Senate and the White House in the Republican Party. But then we saw, that's the way I like to get, but then we saw we did a little too much earmarking, we spent too much pork barrel money, and ethical standards became lax or were lax. And, you know, when Republicans act like Democrats, America loses. It's time for us to change. Change begins with us. Now, Hillary Clinton stands up and says she's the candidate of change. And she would change things. There's no doubt about that. There's some truth to that. It's just not the kind of change you want to see. In my opinion, Hillary Clinton takes her guidepost from the Europe of old. Big government, big brother, big taxes. That's not the right way for America. When she spoke about the economy, she said we could raise taxes on Social Security taxes. We can raise personal income taxes. We can raise corporate taxes. You don't want to raise taxes. That doesn't grow the economy. That slows it down. My view is it's not fair to tax people when they earn their money, when they save their money, and again when they die. So first let's make the death tax dead forever. And second, I have a plan for savings. And my view is that people who are earning $200,000 a year and less, that's almost all of us in this country, 95% of Americans. If you're earning $200,000 a year and less, my view is you ought to be able to save your money with a new tax rate on your interest and your dividends and capital gains, and that tax rate is zero. Let people save their money for their future. I have to tell you that I was mentioning that in Nevada a little while ago, just before the Ames straw poll, and one of the fellows in the audience, Bill Dio, was there, and I was describing John Edwards' plan too. John Edwards has a plan where you get to save $250 a year tax-free. And I said, whoop-de-doo on that plan. And I said, it won't buy you much of a house, won't buy you a retirement, won't buy you a college education. And then Bill Dio popped up and said, it won't buy him a haircut either. So anyway. Very different direction. Hillary Clinton looks at health care, and she says, health care is not working for all Americans, and that's true. And she says, therefore, we have to put more government into it. We're going to give people government insurance and $110 billion in new spending and higher taxes. That's the wrong way. If there's something that's not working well, you say, how do we get government out of it? How do we make it more market-based? How do we give people more responsibility and more choice? That's what I've tried to do in my state of Massachusetts, I think successfully. Half the people that were uninsured when I became governor are now insured. I think we're going to get almost everybody insured over the next year or two. So there are ways of getting the private market work to make sure that our citizens get insured and that we get our healthcare system to work properly. There are other places we disagree. The Democrats look at immigration and they say we have an illegal immigration problem. I have the answer, just make them illegal. That's not the right answer. That's amnesty. The right answer is to say, look, we're going to enforce our borders, secure our borders. We're going to make sure that people who come here legally are welcome. We love legal immigration, but we're going to end illegal immigration. You have perhaps one of the greatest issues of our time, the spread of radical jihad, violence associated with radical Islam. And John Edwards has the temerity to say that there's no global war on terror. It's just a bumper sticker. Now you tell that to the people in Indonesia and Malaysia and Pakistan and India and Lebanon and Israel and Egypt and Tanzania and Kenya and Algeria and Nigeria and Germany and England and, by the way, New York City and Washington, D.C. There's a war being waged by the terrorists. And if I'm president, it'll be waged and won against the terrorists. One thought in that regard. It's been popular for some in the media and some politicians to be highly critical of the president. But let's not forget one thing. He has kept America safe these last 6 years. And that didn't just happen. I mean, he fought for the Patriot Act to give law enforcement the information they needed to find the bad guys before they attacked.